Today, we're talking about the different changes to the Commander brackets, game changers, and what lies in store for Commander's future. I'm Joe, and I'm alone, and this is the Thought Vessel. Welcome to the show. Today, I'm pretty much reading by myself because Jacoby and Levi couldn't be here to help me as we are all very busy, and especially during the week when this announcement was dropped. So I'll be recording this alone. You may also notice that I am recording with my face, and that's because this should be a shorter video, so I should be able to have that in the entire time, quote unquote. But let's get into this. First off, they defined the bracket system a whole lot more, and you'll see the infographic to some side of me. Depends on how I want to set that up. But you'll see that it is more defined between the intent for each bracket as well as different things that go on within each bracket. Let's look at bracket 1, for example, which says you can, in fact, have a lot of the game changers in there as long as they are thematically appropriate and you're not trying to win the game before turn 9. They also removed the tutor restriction from the lower brackets. Now, this is actually quite a big change, but it also helps because all of the important tutors, the things that they wanted to limit at those brackets, they're already game changers and already pretty limited. So if you're using stuff that doesn't tutor up every land or is at least very expensive to tutor up any land, then that's perfectly fine at lower brackets. The other thing that happened was the change to the game changers. And this one was actually huge because they removed 10 cards from the list. Specifically, they focused on high mana value, which was Expropriate, Jin-Gitaxias Core Augur, Sway of the Stars, Vorinclex Voice of Hunger. These 4 cards were pretty much removed because of high mana value. Next, we have legends that are strongest in the command zone, which were Kinnan Prodigy, Urza Lord High Artificer, Winota Joiner of Forces, and Yuriko the Tiger's Shadow. Also, big understanding. The last 2 were not really neat into either category, but felt that they were either not as strong as their other counterparts on the Game Changers, or already had restrictions put in place so that you didn't see that at lower power levels, such as Deflecting SWAT and Food Chain. Food Chain definitely was told to me by Rachel. It already had that combo stipulation, so that makes immediate sense not to do it that way. And Deflecting SWAT, yeah, it has to target very specific spells and doesn't really change the game versus the Force of Will / Fierce Guardianship. It's going to be really nice to see a lot of these cards come off and be played at lower levels, but at the same time, that could be rough. It'll be fine. I'm sure it'll be fine. I don't expect to see a lot of Vorinclex or Jin-Gitaxias in bracket 1 or 2. Sway the Stars, maybe. But that's it. I do know that I need to figure out what I'm going to do with Expropriating Cody now, because now I have another slot for a game changer. That being said, there were some cards that they kept on the list because honestly, they were still strong or didn't have enough time on the list and still needed them to stay on. Cards like Consecrated Sphinx, Coalition Victory, Panoptic Mirror. The Consecrated Sphinx obviously makes sense. That one still remains pretty strong even at lower levels because drawing 2 for every time your opponents draw 1, insane. Unlike the Coalition Victory that I wanted to come off because of that high mana value, but they reasoned that it just got put on the Game Changers from being unbanned, and from being unbanned to the Game Changers, it should stay on a little bit longer. I'm not going to begrudge them that. I'm just going to whine. But Panoptic Mirror also seemed to be that same kind of vein as Food Chain, but in the same strain, they wanted to make sure that it, like Coalition Victory, had its time on the Game Changers list before moving too hastily. Next, we are going to talk about some of the topics that they talked about during the live stream today. First up, They were talking about two cards that were potentially on the chopping block to get banned. These cards are Rhystic Study and Thassa's Oracle. Now, both of these are very famous for being strong cards. Rhystic Study for drawing a massive amount of cards, and Thassa's Oracle for immediately winning the game. Now, as far as opinions, I'll leave that to you because I'm a little reserved on this. I think that Thoracle is fine just staying unbanned, and but as a game changer, given its nature, as long as you're not also doing the demonic consultation or tainted pact. I even said that in a previous episode where, truthfully, demonic consultation slash tainted pact should have been on the game changers list and not Thoracle. But I can also see why that's on the chopping block. Rhystic Study becomes a little bit more difficult because it is one of those that scales real well with the game. Specifically, if you're at lower levels, it's not going to draw as many cards because your opponents aren't casting as many spells, and it's not going to hurt them if they just either pay for it and only play the one spell, or play multiple spells and pay for each time, or even just take one off. I think Rhystic Study is fine staying as a game changer because even in CDH, it is an enabler to get strong plays. At the same time, good players know how to work around a Rhystic Study. Next up, they had the thought process of adding another bracket. Now, this wasn't too out of the norm because they even talked about that when they first introduced the bracket system. They wanted to stick with 5 just to have a very narrow view of it, but never said that that was out of the realm of possibility that there would be more. The ones that they were thinking of slotting into was in between 2 and 3 or 3 and 4, just to really differentiate, because sometimes the brackets needed to be a little bit more differentiated. That's completely understandable because even with the infographic that we showed earlier, there was in fact more of a delineation between bracket 4 and bracket 5 so that it made more sense to figure out where you were. And especially with the focus on meta versus the 2 and 3, because honestly, their biggest reasoning was precons. The fact that bracket 2 just immediately meant precon didn't really solve the issue. And especially because of how many precons that they put out that are for premium product in stronger formats and not necessarily the bog standard precons that you would likely get in a more basic Magic set. This can come back down to the Universes Beyond thing, but at the same time, this also happened with Modern Horizons 3, so it's not unusual to see in more higher power Magic sets. Now, the last thing is definitely a point of contention because one of the biggest things that I saw, it was super compelling at first, but then they really biffed it with one of the cards that they brought up. The point that they were trying to deliberate on was hybrid mana cost and its place in Commander. They were toying with the idea of players using the hybrid mana cards in the single colors of one side of the card instead of strictly keeping it color identity. They made a lot of compelling arguments that the combination of the hybrid cards are typically weaker than their monocolored counterparts around the same cost range. That can be all well and good. I can understand that being a decent argument, even if I still don't agree with it. Because at the end of the day, Commander was founded, and specifically Elder Dragon Highlander, EDH, was founded on color identity being integral to the format. It's why they did it that way. It's why they wanted that for creativity reasons. The thing that really drove the nail in the coffin for their argument, though, was that they brought up Beseech the Queen and how the hybrid of 2 colorless and a black, that could be put into any deck because the hybrid could just be cast for 6 colorless mana. That I had vehemently disagreed with, because my immediate thought process was, well, it's not going to just be cast for 6 generic mana, because there are many decks that, after they made the change of how lands and even artifacts can produce mana in Commander, you can in fact have black mana sources in non-black decks, and that still can just be cast for 3. I vehemently disagreed with this. It does not make sense, and it truthfully should not happen. That's at least my 2 cents. We can certainly get more 2 cents from the others. We'll definitely be discussing this more at the end of the year. We just really wanted to get this one talked about because it is so soon, and we've kept doing this for each other time that they've made updates. I think that there were some goods, some bads, and some uglies. The goods, removing some of the game changers was important. They wanted to narrow down the list because they had already made a pretty big list. And Levi certainly tackled that much earlier on when we were talking about when they added more stuff to the game changers list. The bad was specifically some of the thought processes around the bannings and the hybrid mana, where the ugly was definitely an overreach with the Beseech the Queen. I truthfully think that that should not come to pass. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200 to use a Hasbroism. Truthfully, I think that the shining thing about all of this was the hard stance and update to the brackets and how they are supposed to be. I can't wait to see what comes from this, but definitely give us your thoughts. What do you think about these changes? Do you agree with them? Did you disagree with them? Are you happy that there's more definition like Levi would be? Or are you more happy that there are different game changers that are no longer game changers that you can use at lower power? Or are you like Jacoby and certainly me of not liking that to hybrid, the mana cost hybrid changing color identity? I've been Joe, and these have been the Thought Vessel Thoughts. Make sure that you keep your hybrid mana out of my monocolor decks.